Hey everybody, it is Jason from Jason Bogat's Photography, and today I'm going to give you an inside look at one of the edits I did for this image on screen from Star Wars Weekends. It features the character Sabine Wren from the upcoming Star Wars Rebels animated series, as shown here from somebody in costume. And the first thing that I noticed about this photo is that it was a little bit underexposed. So the first thing I'm going to do is bump up the exposure to about there, to where it's supposed to be. I'm going to add a little extra contrast to it just to give it a little bit more of a boom factor. And then one thing that I'm noticing on her face is that some of these highlights here are a little bit harsh. It's one of the things that happens when you're working outside and you get that pretty hard sunlight. So I'm going to drop the highlights down by about half, and you'll see that that makes a pretty big difference in her face. If I bump this, particularly around her cheeks and on her forehead, if you watch that as I reset that and then bring it back down to about there, that looks pretty good. Then I want to bring up some of the shadows, which will help bring out some of the detail in her costume. So I'm going to go ahead and bump that up by about 50. And you can see that you get just a little extra detail in her costume, which helps the overall exposure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bump up the clarity, which is going to give the appearance of a little extra sharpness, because what it does is it brings out a little more contrast in the midtones. And to help sell the animated kind of look to it, I'm going to bring up the vibrance of the colors, and you'll be able to see that here when I reset it and then redo this. So I'm just making the vibrancy, I'm making the colors a little bit more vibrant, but I don't want it to be too cartoony, so I want to keep it somewhat balanced. So I'm bringing the saturation down, and then what I want to do is to give it more of a cinematic look, I'm going to a 2.35 to 1 crop, which is very similar to what you see in most Hollywood blockbusters. It's that ultra widescreen. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, which gives it a nice cinematic look. And then one other thing that I want to do here is I want to bring the exposure down in the background. I don't want to touch anything on her. So I'm going to bring the exposure down by about 3/4 of a stop. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to brush out all the clarity, and I'm going to brush out all the sharpness, just to help bring focus more to her. And as I brush over here, you'll be able to see what this is doing. So it not only darkens the background, but it actually pretty much, for all intents and purposes, takes out a lot of the detail that's back there. So I can just brush over the vast majority of this like that. And then Lightroom has this really cool auto mask feature, which basically allows me to go over a lot of the background stuff, and as long as the crosshair isn't in the section that I'm trying to avoid being brushed on, it doesn't impact anything. So it's going to be something like that. Clicking on this, it'll show what I actually brushed over, so that way if I need to go in and make a couple adjustments, I can go ahead and do that. And that looks good like that. So go ahead and take that off. I think I'm done. And basically what I ended up doing here is, it, as you can see, it just brings a little bit more of the focus back to her just by dropping the exposure back in the background. So I'm darkening that, and like I said, bringing the clarity down, which basically for this particular step in the editing process is just reducing the contrast, so it's kind of forcing everything to blend together in the background a little bit more. In the same way with the sharpness, I just don't want that to, I want to take out as much of that sharpness as possible. So I'm done there. And then the one other thing that I want to do here is add an extra vignette to the edges. I don't want to go too crazy and darken this too much, so I'm going to keep it with just a mild vignette, and that'll help bring the focus back into her a little bit more. And with that, I am done. There's a quick look at just one of the images that I edited. This is something that I really ended up liking the look of. And if you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave them below. Also feel free to share this video. Go ahead and like it. And until next time, thanks for watching. Take care.